All right, guys. Good morning. Let's start the session. Okay, now agenda for this session. We'll understand what is the role of a data engineer first. What is the job of a data engineer? And then we will see what are the services on AWS that will help us to work with data and generate insights with the data. Okay, that is the agenda for today's particular session. Okay, before I start, I would like to take confirmation from you all. You all guys able to hear my voice and see my screen?
Yes. Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you guys. So basically,
Yes.
it did. Okay, thank you. Now, before going to data engineer job role, right? Let's discuss a little bit about data. Why data is important for companies? Why do they employ a lot of professionals like a data engineer, ML engineer, AI engineer, data analyst, data architect, okay, ML ops engineer? Why do they employ a lot of people who work on data? What is that data brings to the table? One thing is that decision making. Every company or every decision maker, if he has to make some decisions, it is with the help of data. Okay, like for example, a CEO of a company, a CFO of a company, they all make decisions. Directors, they all make decisions, right? So about 15 years back, if a decision has to be made, it used to be with a gut feel of that particular person. But now every decision is based on data. Okay, that is one reason why data is very important. Second, if I want to run the operations of any company efficiently, then also you need data. For example, let's say uh, a big billion day on Flipkart. Okay, now they get 100 times more orders than a normal days. Now, if they have to deliver items in time or deliver appropriate products to the customers at the promised time, okay, you need to have data of the previous years, what products has sold, how many numbers have sold, which city, which products, etc., etc. You need to have all the data. Then only we will be able to run the operations of the company effectively. Okay. One more reason why data is important. With the help of data, we can develop the products that customers are looking for, or we can get some. We can develop the products. Let's say, for example, there's a company called as X. Okay, this is a US based company. About 6 years back, they went to all the hospitals in the world. What kind of hospitals? Let's say eye hospitals. Okay, they purchase the records of all the patients at a very economical cost. They purchase more than about 1 billion records from different hospitals of patients. After purchasing the records means nothing but data, right? They developed one program to understand what is there in the records. After this program fully understood about all these records, they developed a product. Okay. Now, this product is basically, if any customer or any patient, if they put this product to their eyes, right? Okay, it's like a physical product they can put to the eyes. So this one will exactly tell the condition of their eyes. Okay, based on the records that it has, they purchase from all other patients. Now it will say what is the site, what is the medication they have to use, what are the glasses they have to use, etc., everything. Now this company, to the same place where they have purchased these records, they are selling this product in millions of dollars. So this product is developed with the help of data. So there are a lot of products like that. Let's say now some of there are smart cars, right? Now you will get alerts if the car is going more than 80 kilometers, or if the fuel is going to be empty, etc. There's a lot of alerts, right? So that product is also developed with the help of data. Okay, there's a company called as Bosch. They have developed, because they have huge amounts of automobile data. They didn't do any. They don't know what to do with that. They have analyzed and come up with an idea. Okay, we can come up with a product like this. Okay, so nowadays with the help of data, you can also develop products. So what I'm trying to say is that the importance of data. So if you want to make a decision, proper decision, you need data. If you want to run your operations of your company, you need data. If you want to develop any new products, you need data. So data is very, very important. That is the reason data professionals are paid higher, and there are a lot of job opportunities for people who can handle data in the industry. So now there are a lot of people who handles the data. Like it's not only data engineer, there is data architect, there is data engineer, there is ML engineer, AI engineer, ML ops engineer, data analyst. These are the different designations, people who work on data. Now let's see, out of all these roles, what is the job of a data engineer? Okay. Now we understood data is very important, right? We understood data is very important. Now let's take an example of Flipkart. Where does Flipkart gets its data? You know, data is very important, but where do Flipkart gets its data from? Let's say Flipkart has its database from the Flipkart's web application, that is website. Okay, from the websites, you know, there is we write review product reviews. There is one data, and the delivery data, stock data. That means the stock in the godowns. Um, let's consider some other. Let's say we have approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 7 sources of data that Flipkarts get the data from, right? Now, let's say Flipkart CEO, he wants to launch one. He wants to develop and launch one laptop product into the market. Now, first question is whether he has to launch or not. If he launches, which month he has to launch, what cost he has to put, how many products he has to manufacture, what is the marketing strategy, who are their clientele. Okay, all there are hundreds of questions that he has to answer. Now, where does he get answer for all these questions? From all this data. Okay, but no, data is there in multiple locations. No, is it easy to analyze for me if the data is there in multiple locations? It is difficult for me if the data is there in multiple locations. Then what we need to do, we need to bring all this data into one common location. Okay, that common location, we can call it as data lake, or data warehouse, or delta lake. Okay, Now, what is the difference between a data lake, data warehouse, delta lake? We'll see that in the tomorrow session. Okay. But if you want to analyze our data, we need to create one system that all our company's data will be there in it. Now, who will design? Who will design and develop this system? This is one job of a data engineer. Okay. Designing a data lake or a data warehouse or a delta lake. On AWS, we call these solutions data warehouse as Redshift, Lakehouse. Okay. So we'll understand a little deeper about these solutions later. But AWS, for a data engineer to do his job well, AWS have all the services. Okay. Now let's say we build this solution, which is a data lake or data warehouse or delta lake. Now we have the data here, right? All this data we need to bring here. Okay. Now what is this? These are nothing but data pipelines. Now who designs this data pipelines? This is also done by a data engineer. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is that basically what is the job role of a data engineer? One job role is of a data engineer is to design and develop data warehouse or a delta lake or a data lake. And second job of a data engineer is to design data pipelines. Any questions still here, anybody? You can please unmute yourself and ask. Are you guys following me? Just give me a thumbs up in the chat if you guys are following me.
Actually, one doubt, sir. Actually, for like
Go ahead, go ahead.
basically, yeah, it's a kind of centralized monitoring, right? Centralized managing or centralized monitoring. What is the difference between you said we'll be maintaining the data in centralized, so that using the data pipeline, we will have the data in central place. So basically, we have application monitoring also, right? So we will generating logs and we'll be monitoring all this. In what is the difference between that?
See,
Log also it's a more data, right?
it is also a log is also a data. So we will bring that log data also to the data lake for us to analyze. Let's say, I'll tell you an example for your question. Let's say we have this 4G networks, 5G networks, right? Now let's say there's a 5G network. So let's take Airtel or any 5G network. So this network, what will have? It will have lot of servers. Okay. Now, let's say we are promising our customers 99% availability. So now the 99% availability will be dependent on how much time the servers will be up. So now, if any server is going down, so it is quite common that servers will go down for a fraction of a second and come up, right? So I want to collect all the logs so that only I will understand which server is going, how many number of times, then I can replace the server, etc., etc. So all these logs, I will use some tool. Okay, there are a lot of tools in the market to collect the logs. I'll collect all the logs and I'll put here and I'll analyze that logs. Okay. So then I'll be able to understand how my servers are working. Okay. Now you're asking about monitoring. Okay. Monitoring is basically, there are a couple of things that we can monitor. Let's say this data pipelines. Now every day, whatever data is coming here, it has to come here. I can monitor these data pipelines, whether they are working fine or not. I can monitor this data warehouse, whether it is working fine or not. Okay, I can monitor any hardware that is involved in a data engineering world, whether that particular system is working properly or not. So we have something called as, on specifically to AWS, which is called as Cloud Trail and Cloud Watch. Cloud Trail is the solution. What you are asking for logs. Cloud Watch is a monitoring service, but we have to configure. It is not like by default they will give us the reports that we are looking for. We have to configure them.
Okay.
Is that what the answer that you're looking for, Sumant? It's Sumant, right?
No, it's Parandaman.
Sorry, Parandama, that's a. Does that
yes.
answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, now we understood one of the role of a data engineer is like configuring this system and creating data pipelines. Okay, these are the two jobs of a data engineer. Now there is one more very important job of a data engineer. Let's say we get data from multiple sources, right? Let's say this is source 1 and source 2. Okay, now in source 1 my data is like this. Okay, first column name I have it as name. Second column I have it as city, and phone number. Okay, from the second source I'm getting, the second application is collecting similar data, but the column names I have it as name, but here it is location and mobile number. Okay, let's say I have some customer data X A. Let's say location is Bangalore and Hyderabad. Mobile number 123 and 456. Okay, here customer name is, let's say, B, city, Hyderabad, Bangalore, some mobile numbers. Now let's say if I want to know how many people are staying from Bangalore, will I be able to get that answer? I'll not be able to get, because here the column name is city, here the column name is location. Then what I need to do, I need to change the city to location or this location to city. That basically is called as transformation. How to do these transformations? We can use a PySpark code. Okay, we can write a PySpark program to change this column names, or else AWS has something called as Data Brew, which is a codeless transformation tool. Okay, or if I want to run my PySpark also, AWS has something called as AWS Glue. So here we will learn a lot of transformations, how to do transformations by using AWS. So if we see multiple roles of a data engineer, one role is transformation of data. Second role is building data pipelines. Third role is designing data warehouse or data lake or delta lake. So any organization, any cloud, right? This is what a data engineer will do, or this is what a major work of a data engineer. It could be any cloud. It could be AWS cloud. It could be Azure cloud, or it could be GCP cloud. Any cloud, this is what they will do. Okay. Now, for us to do this work properly, okay, on AWS, so AWS has a lot of services there. They have around 200 plus services. What do I mean by a service here? Let's say if I want to store data on AWS, how do I store? AWS is saying that I have created one solution for you. The solution name is S3, or we can call this as a service. So if I want to store data on AWS, one of the service that I can use is called as S3. Similarly, for every problem, we have some service. Let's say if I want to host a website, there are multiple options. One is I can use a service called as EC2 and host a website, or I can use something called as MERN Stack and host a website, or I can use something called as Lambda and host a website, right? Yeah, these are the three options, or else we can use ECS to host a website.
S3?
S3 static website, yes, we can host it. These are the different types of solutions we have to host a website. So now it is up to us. AWS is giving a lot of options. Now for our business use case, for our application, what is a better solution? We need to understand. We need to design, or we need to architect our solution on AWS. Similarly, AWS has around 200 services. Okay. So there are different verticals on AWS. One is AWS infrastructure architect. So AWS, we can call them as AWS solutions architect. That means if you want to deploy an application on AWS, this fellow can do that very well. Okay. Now, if you want to deploy an application continuously by using CI/CD, that is continuous integration and continuous deployment, there are services which are related to DevOps. That is basically a AWS DevOps engineer will do that. Okay. Now, if you want to work with data, AWS data engineer. Okay. And if you want to work with security, AWS security specialist. So there are different roles on AWS itself. So we will not be able to learn everything, right? So we will concentrate on a vertical, which is AWS data engineer. So any role, DevOps or data engineer or security or solution architect, first of all, they should know some basics of cloud and basics of AWS. Then only we will be able to learn some advanced stuff. So in these sessions, I'll teach you basics of cloud. What is cloud? Why do we need cloud? What are different types of cloud, etc. And then basically teach you guys how AWS services work, how AWS console work, how to work with AWS CLI, how to configure some basic stuff. And then we will work with AWS related, data engineer related services. Okay. So now we'll discuss some of the services that we are going to learn throughout this particular course. I think you guys must have got a detailed course sheet which is having a day-wise schedule, because this is going to be for 45 days. So I have included some of the basic concepts also, because when you say that you're an AWS data engineer, the industry expectation is that you should know some basic stuff on AWS also. That is the reason we have put this for 45 sessions with data engineering services and couple of non-data engineering services. Okay. Now let us discuss about couple of services that we are going to use on AWS. Okay, one of the service, as somebody have pointed out a few minutes back, AWS S3. So what is AWS S3? It stands for Simple Storage Service. Okay, so this is basically called as object storage. So that means S3 stores data in the form of objects. Now you can ask me, okay, what is other forms it can store? Now there are different other types of storage called as SAN storage and NAS storage. Okay. And the third one is object storage. Now S3, it works like an object storage. That means what? Any data it stores in the form of an image or in the form of a photo. Now let's say there's a Excel sheet. Now S3 stores that like an image, not like an actual Excel sheet. Okay. So read and write operations would be read operations would be very fast if you store data in the form of an object. Now you can store any amount of data to S3. There is just one limitation, like one file size cannot go beyond 5 TB. So on AWS, if you are storing data on a database, on a virtual machine, or any other service, right? Indirectly, the data is actually stored on S3. Okay, we can actually create S3 service and store the data, but there are a lot of other services that we'll discuss in future. If you're storing data there, they indirectly store the data on AWS S3. Okay, that is one service that we learn. This is very pretty easy. Okay, the next service that we are going to learn is called as AWS Glue. So this is very important for a data engineer, and if you go for interviews, you are going to get questions majorly on AWS Glue. Okay, now if you have to be good at Glue, you should know Python. Okay, we are going to use AWS libraries and then write some code here for transformations. Okay, now what does this AWS tool will do? It is basically a ETL tool on AWS. AWS Glue is a ETL tool. So it performs all the actions I told, transformations, right? It can perform transformations, extraction of data, and loading the data. Now, it is also capable of integrating with other services like S3, like Redshift, very easily. Okay, so we will extensively learn AWS Glue. We'll at least do 6-7 hands-on exercises on AWS Glue, so that it will be we'll be very comfortable working on AWS Glue. Okay, so the next hands-on exercise, so next topic that we will learn is called as Redshift. Okay, now this is also very important from a AWS for a data engineer. Redshift is also very important. So after Glue, the major questions would be on Redshift. Now what is this? This Redshift is a data warehouse on AWS. If you want to create a data warehouse on AWS, it happens on Redshift. Now it is a petabyte scale data warehouse. That means you can store huge amount of data and analyze this petabytes data which is there on data warehouse. Okay, now once you get some data, you process that data in Glue and you can put the data on Redshift, or else on Redshift you want to create tables, you can create tables, you can query the tables, and the results would be very faster. Okay, now before we learn about Redshift, if you guys know about data warehouse, that's okay. If you don't know about data warehouse, then we'll basically teach a little bit about data warehouse. What is a data warehouse? What are fact tables? What are dimension tables? What is a star schema? What is a snowflake schema? We'll understand that, and we will see how Redshift will work. Okay, so these two are like heart of data engineering services on AWS. Now there is something called as data pipeline. So we will learn about AWS data pipeline. So this data pipeline will basically, it will help us to move the data. Okay, data pipeline will basically help us to move the data between AWS services. Okay, so it could be periodic, it could be data driven workflows. So we can also say that if we want to configure workflows, we can use data pipelines. Okay, we will configure at least 6 to 7 pipelines to understand how these data pipelines will work. Next, we will learn about AWS EMR. EMR stands for Elastic Map Reduce. So now, if you want to create a Hadoop kind of environment on AWS, you have to work with this service called as AWS EMR. Here, you can write map reduce programs, or you can also write Spark programs. Okay, we can also write map reduce programs, or you can also write Spark programs. So it will help us to process huge amounts of data very quickly. So now you can also process data in Glue. Also, you can process data in EMR also. What is the difference? So if you have an on-premises Hadoop environment, okay, if you want to replicate that on AWS, then you have to use AWS EMR. Any questions still here, guys? Are you guys able to follow me?
Yes, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So S3 and the Redshift, right? What's the difference between these two? Okay,
So
and
S3,
also,
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
the other question is, so AWS Glue, where we use for the kind of transformation, right? Again, the data pipeline. This is also kind of the moving the data, right? It's kind of, so I'd like to understand what's the difference of these two. Okay.
Okay. So answer for your first question, what is the difference
Yeah.
between S3 and Redshift? S3 is capable of only storing data. Okay, we cannot run any queries on that. In a Redshift, we can store the data in the form of
Okay.
tables where there is schema. Okay, the prerequisite
Okay.
is the table the data should have some schema, and it only stores structured data. Whereas S3 can store any kind of data, structured data, unstructured data, or a semi-structured data. Okay, Redshift only stores structured data, and there should be some schema to the data, and data is stored in the form of tables where there is rows and columns, so that to run queries, it is very easy. Whereas S3, it stores the data, but we cannot run any queries on that. Okay, that
So
is
it's a common kind of a file. So if we want to verify any data in S3, we cannot verify.
I'm sorry, you're saying that you want to query the data in S3?
No, no. If we need to check, no. If we need to check any data in S3, we cannot check.
No, we can check. We can open the file and check. Let's say there
so
is
nothing,
a.
but it's a form of file. So when you say it's an object, it's a form of files. It will be stored in S3.
Yeah, it's just an object that it is stored in S3. So now let's say
So
I have.
object is a file.
Yes, it is a file. You can say it
Okay.
is a file. Now let's say I have
Okay.
a file called as sales.csv. Okay. In this file,
Okay.
from past 10 years, how many sales happen in my company, everything is there. Let's say one
Okay.
product here is mobiles. Okay. Now, if I want to
Okay.
know how many mobiles I have sold from past 10 years, if the data is there in S3, I will not be able to get that information. I cannot query that. I can simply store the file. I can open the file. But if I want to know how many mobiles I have sold in past 10 years, I'll not be able to know. But if the same data is there in Redshift, it is stored in the form of tables. I can simply query, select whatever is the product name from the table name. It will show me how many products I have sold. That is the difference between S3 and Redshift.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, now your next question is between Glue and data pipeline. So Glue,
Yes.
Glue basically does ETL operations. ETL operations means extract, transform, and load. Okay.
Oh,
Now, data pipeline, let's say, as you asked me, difference between S3 and Redshift. Now, let's say I'm getting data from application, some application, I'm getting data to S3. Now, once I get the data to S3, I want to shift that to Redshift. Okay.
okay.
Now, how can I do that? By using something called as data pipeline. So whenever, let's say, if I'm getting data once in a minute, once in a second, once in 1 hour, whenever I get data to S3, I want that to be loaded to Redshift. Now, you can ask me, you can directly load to Redshift. Why you're loading to S3? Because we can store any kind of data on S3. But if I want to store data in Redshift, basically it should have some schema. It should fit into some table. It will take some time. By the time Redshift understands and put the data into the table format, it will take some time. But if application is putting the data on S3, S3 accepts any kind of data. It will not do any kind of this pre-processing, whether I can put the data here or not. So data comes to S3 first. And from there, I can put it on Redshift, or I can put it on any other service that I want with the help of data pipeline. Whereas Glue, I gave you one example, right? Let's say one column name is mobile, another column name is phone number. Now I want to change from this to this one, this to this one. How I can do that? Can a data pipeline do that? No, data pipeline will not be able to do that. Its job is to take the data and put it here. But what can do this change? This ETL, that is nothing but Glue will be able to do that change. That is the
Okay,
difference.
so if let's say if I have two different applications and one application is storing as mobile and one application is storing as phone number and nothing but two different files, and in that scenario, do we need to use Glue?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. Can you please repeat that?
So, okay, so in what scenario that Glue will be used? I understand the concept how it is going to work, but let's say there is another application. So one application is storing as mobile number, and another application is storing as a phone number, for example. So, and we need to combine those two data. So in that scenario, we have to use Glue.
Yes, if I have to combine these two data, then I have to make some changes, no? Okay, now I'll give you one more example. This mobile number and phone number is a generic example. Let me give you one more example. In the data, one of the column, I'm not giving the full data set. One of the column is like this. Okay. The column name is timestamp. Okay. And the data is like this. Let's say 2022 month 10 day 5 let's say 22 minutes and seconds. Okay, 2023 10 5 something, 2022 etc 2021. So in this basically data set, let's say this is complete data set. This is one column, and one column is name of the customer, second column is product, third column is cost. Okay, this is one, they have purchased the product. Now in this data set, do I have a year? I want to know which year how many sales has happened. There is no year anywhere, right? I have to extract the year from this column. So now I have to create one more column, and I have to get this 2022. The column name is year, and I have to get 2023. I have to get 2022, 2021. Then only I'll be able to come which year how many sales has happened, right? This operation, how I can do? By using Glue.
Okay.
Okay. If you want to do any transformations, we can do that by using Glue. So with the Glue, by using code, now if you want to do same thing without writing the code, we have another service called as data group. Okay, same operation. Whatever I told here, same thing. If you want to do with code, you can use Glue. If you don't want to write a code, you're not a developer, you can write. Same thing you can achieve by using Data Brew as well. So AWS is giving multiple services. It is up to us what you are comfortable with. You can use that service and get the desired results, but cost will be varying depending on the service that you're going to use.
Okay, both are AWS services only.
Yeah, both are AWS services. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question here. I was going to connect between S3 and Redshift. Now we do have AWS Glue and AWS Redshift, right? AWS Glue, we are doing the extraction.
Yeah.
Now, after doing the extraction or ETL processing, is that the data that we are storing in the Redshift?
Yes.
Or can we directly store the data from S3, use the pipelines, and then put it on Redshift?
Put it under?
Redshift.
Yes. So one of the... Go ahead.
So from S3, if we use AWS Glue, that means we can transform the data, whatever is there in S3, right?
Yeah.
And then we should be able to load that data in a Redshift.
Correct.
Am I correct? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to put these 4 things together, right? We have S3, Glue, Redshift, and pipeline.
Right. You can do that. See, now with the Glue also you can put the data to Redshift. With the data pipeline also you can put the data to Redshift. But you need to understand which service you have to use in which use cases.
Okay. And the pipelines are just the more of the workflow, right? Let's say how much data you want to process at once, or I guess there's more like the timelines, schedules, and those things, right? And
no,
there's
the pipelines is basically for data movement.
Data move and the kind of the same the file type, whatever the number of columns and the table in the Redshift, just it's a one-to-one mapping kind of, and just moving the data.
It's just moving the data. It's just moving the data.
Okay. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So we discussed till last service we discussed this AWS EMR and AWS Data Brew. So AWS EMR is basically if we are already on premises using Hadoop cluster and Hadoop kind of environment. If you want to shift entirely to AWS, then you need to choose a service called as AWS EMR. EMR stands for MapReduce. So you can run all the MapReduce programs. So what does a MapReduce program will do? A MapReduce program will also do the transformations for us. Okay, but these programs may be written in Java. Okay, or majorly in Java. So nowadays there are very less people, data engineers who can work in Java. That's the reason MapReduce is replaced by Spark. But still there are some companies who are using MapReduce. So if you want to create that kind of environment on AWS, then it is nothing but EMR. All right. Now the next service on AWS Data Engineering is called as AWS Athena. Okay. Now, if you want to run some ad hoc queries to analyze the data, then we can use AWS Athena. That means, let's say my data is there in S3 only. Okay, let's say normally if I want to run queries, previously I told that you have to move the data to Redshift, and in the Redshift there are tables and we can analyze that. But let's say I have my data in S3 only, but I want to query the data. Now in S3 I cannot query the data, right? Because it is only for storing the data. Then I can access the files which are there in S3 from Athena and run SQL queries. Those are basically ad hoc queries. They'll not create permanent tables on Athena. Only if you want to run some ad hoc interactive queries without some ETL jobs to prepare the data, then you can use a service called as AWS Athena. Okay, the next one is called as, okay, this is also very important for a data engineer, which is called as AWS Kinesis. Okay, Now, let's say we all know Twitter, right? Let's say there is Twitter and there is, let's say, hashtag Virat. Now, I want to bring all the tweets that are related with hashtag Virat into AWS and process that request. Okay. How that happens? With the help of Kinesis. Now, Kinesis is a platform to work with, I mean, not only streaming data, we can also work with batch data, but it is highly used for streaming data on AWS. Now, it also has capabilities of collecting data anywhere outside AWS. Okay, we can also process the data and analyze the data in real time. Okay, we can analyze the data in real time by using Kinesis. Okay, in the classroom, we are going to do one hands-on exercise where we can create one Twitter API and bring the live data to AWS and then understand and process the data basically. Okay, we will do that hands-on exercise in AWS by using AWS Kinesis. The next one is called as, the next service is DynamoDB. Now, there are different types of databases. One database is called as Relational Database Management System. Okay, and there is NoSQL database. If you want to work with NoSQL databases on AWS, you can create with the help of DynamoDB. Okay, so NoSQL database, if you want to create on AWS, it is DynamoDB. A relational database, if you want to create on AWS, it is called as RDS. So we will create databases with the help of RDS. We will create a database with the help of DynamoDB. And there is AWS Lakehouse. Okay, this is also to store the data, but a kind of Delta Lake. Okay, so what is a Delta Lake? We'll understand that tomorrow. Data Lake, Delta Lake, data warehouse. In the tomorrow's session, we'll understand. But this is also part of AWS Data Engineering. And next one, the last service is AWS Batch. We'll understand how to work with batch data with the help of AWS Batch, and we will see security and permissions on AWS, or you can say governance on AWS by using services like AWS IAM and AWS Federation. So these are the couple of things that we will use for managing security of data and permissions on AWS by using IAM. Okay, so these, I mean, we have given you even the smallest topic in each of these topics. So what I have told you is like overview of what are the major topics that we'll be learning throughout this 45 sessions. Okay, any questions, anybody?
Where is PySpark? I know you did touch PySpark a little bit, right? Is PySpark also falling somewhere here?
Yeah, we will cover the PySpark. I mean, when we are teaching Glue, so Glue is basically we'll write some PySpark code, right? So before we go to Glue, we will understand what is PySpark, how to create RDDs, how to create data frames, how to process the data by using RDDs, how to process the data by data frames, and then running that in the Glue.
Okay. And do you need to know Python, or will we learn Python as well as required?
See, you have to learn Python. Okay. But in the class, we'll just take 1 hour, 1.5 hour Python, explain you about the basic stuff about Python. The prerequisite would be Python.
Gotcha.
Because Python itself will take about 15-20 days, right? So this program is only for 45 sessions. So
Right.
yeah.
And one other thing is, does Databricks come into play anywhere here, or
Databricks, basically, Databricks is a company. Okay, it is developed by the people who has developed Spark engine. So now, if you want to run a Spark program, first of all, you need to have an infrastructure like a server. And in the server, you need to have Python, you need to have Spark program, you need to have Spark ecosystem like Hive, Uzi, Zookeeper, etc., etc. Now, it is a lot of administrative task here, right? So what these people who has developed the Spark, what they have done is that, let us create a UI, okay? And this UI, let us host on some server. The server will have all these capabilities. Now, if anybody is trying to open this UI and running a Spark program, they don't need to install all these things because they're already there. Now, this Databricks, they have partnered with AWS, they have partnered with Azure, GCP, and infrastructure is provided by these companies. The technology is by Databricks. Now, once you open this console, you can directly write your PySpark code. So basically, if you know to write a PySpark code, that means you already know Databricks, because in a Databricks, you do ETL operations by writing a PySpark code. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, guys, before we close?
Sorry, one last question from my side. Since Kinesis is used for more of the live streaming and then even live processing, analyzing, right?
Yes. Yes.
Is it exactly same as Kafka, or is it something different?
No, it is not exactly like Kafka. It is different.
Okay.
Okay. We'll understand once we learn about the Kinesis. You'll understand how different it is from Kafka.
So,
or you can say it has more capabilities than Kafka. All right. See you guys tomorrow. You guys have a great day. Tomorrow we'll understand about a little bit about data warehouse, database, what is the difference between them, what is OLTP, what is OLAP, and I'll walk you guys through AWS console, do little hands-on and see how easy that is. All right.
sure. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you for joining, guys. You guys have a good time. Take care.